Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Shane McHugh, group wine buyer at the wonderful Goodman Restaurants in London. Coming up on today's show, Shane shows us that he's up for the crack with anyone.
Arnold Schwarzenegger came in for a really late dinner one night, and I was just in one of those moods where I was just in the mood for just having a bit of crack with everyone.
Phil is true to his roots. As a Scotsman, I don't think I could have sounded any more Scottish. And Shane reveals a particular out-of-depth moment.
And then I got a phone call from the Secret Service 2 days before my flight that freaked me out.
All that and so much more as we chat through Shane's wonderful story and journey to date. Shane is a natural hospitality giver and is very generous with his time and his stories in today's chat. As a result, it's a wonderful journey and a great insight as to where you can go when you have a thirst for learning coupled with humility. Don't forget, we launch a brand new episode each week telling the amazing and always amusing stories from hospitality, so please remember to like, subscribe and review on whatever platform you're listening. Enjoy! Hello and welcome to the next episode of Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street. Today we venture into the world of restaurants, and not only that, one of my favourite brands as we combine two of my favourite things: high quality, ethically sourced beef and wine. And we're coming down on the side of wine today as we welcome the group wine buyer of Goodman Restaurants. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show Shane McHugh.
Oh, thank you very much, Phil. It's lovely to be here.
How are you doing?
Yeah, mighty, thank you. It's a beautiful, overcast late summer's day, as promised, in East London.
Very good. Yeah, I was going to ask you where you said before we switched the microphone on that you're from home today. Where do you base yourself?
Well, not just moved. I feel like I've just moved. That was back in March, and I'm kind of halfway between Leighton and Leytonstone on the Central Line.
Okay, cracking links then. I first moved to London. 2004, and we picked Stratford basically because of the links. The Central Line's a great line to be on.
Yeah, it's great for me as well because my schedule is constantly changing. So I wake up in the morning and I have to be in one of 5 restaurants. So
Right.
it's a nice thing to have this system where I am, where I can just get anywhere pretty handy.
Absolutely. Did I get the pronunciation right on your surname, by the way? As a
You
Scotsman, I don't think I could have sounded any more Scottish.
you nailed it. You absolutely nailed
Right.
it.
That's the Celtic connection. That's what it is.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
absolutely nailed it. I can't. Yeah, it's 50-50, that one. It's 50-50. I do remember when I used to do competitions, like sommelier competitions when I was younger, and I don't think there was a single competition I competed in where they got my name right.
Right. Okay. So there we are. It definitely is a Celtic thing then. That stick a Mick in front of anything and my accent starts coming back in swathes.
Yeah, same as, or an O, and I'll go for it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, well, how's life in Goodman at the moment?
Things are looking up, Phil. Really good. I think this is the first time that we've all just looked at each other and said, "We're finally there. We're so close to
Brilliant.
being there." After reopening and closing 5-6 times, I think. After
Yeah.
starting an online retail business, after putting everybody on furlough, I think we're really finally there. It's interesting this time around in terms of our business levels, because obviously you would have noticed yourself when hospitality reopened, it went from 0 to 100 in a matter of no time because people were
Yeah.
going out as much as they possibly could without the insurance of knowing that they'll be able to do it again soon. Whereas this time around, the bookings have been really interesting because it's been booked in a very kind of, yeah, just kind of planned out, mapped out sort of a thing. I think people are a bit more reassured that we're not going anywhere this time around. So we're
Mm.
kind of, it took us a while to get us back to where we want to be, but we're just about there. The last couple of weeks in particular have been great, and then the autumn and the winter are looking good. So fingers crossed, and
Great.
hopefully it's the same for everybody else in the industry too, because this is, I think, if we were all to push something at the top of our list to Santa Claus last year, it was probably to know that we'll be open for the last 6 months of this year, and it looks like we're going to get it.
Yeah.
And if we do, God, the difference it's going to make for us all.
Yeah, and that's really encouraging as well because you're a city centre business, and the city well, city centres all over the world are recovering slower than non-cities. So it's really encouraging to hear that that your numbers are getting back to a positive place.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a really fascinating thing because obviously, like you said, so we're based in within the heart of the city near a bank on Old Jewry Street, and then we're also based on the Isle of Dogs and Canary Wharf. So we're right in kind of the middle of the two business slash financial areas of the
Yeah,
city. And I think out for those two, and then our Zelman restaurant in Knightsbridge, the return to form on those has just been, yeah, it's been so surprising. But I think as well, we kind of forget, like, we forget how massive London actually is. Like, myself and yourself are in hospitality, and as big as that is, it's tiny. Everybody knows everybody. But
yeah,
in regards, like, London itself, it's big, it's absolutely massive, but it's also kind of small in the fact that we decided. I remember the first time around when we decided to reopen, it was all kind of based on people coming back to work, da da da. And then this time around, it was we found out through our regulars were so good at letting us know what was going on business wise, so that gave us such a good indication of when we could reopen.
mm,
And I remember at one point we were told by somebody, I'm not going to name it, but they're like, "Oh, this particular business is coming back to 50% to offices next week." And we were like, 50%. I was like, oh, okay. Well, let's do the numbers and see how it looks. And then the guy was like, no, 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 50%. So that's about 2,500 people. And then we were
right,
like, right, okay. So that gives us a bit more of a reason. And the dots kind of all aligned after that. And once it happened, we just kind of went for it. So yeah, it's been a
yeah.
really fascinating study about kind of the different areas of London and how they've all kind of re-emerged from the shambles of the last 2 years.
Yeah, I suppose that's the thing, right? The offices are taking things as they see them, right? I mean, some offices are saying to people, "Don't worry about it yet. We're not going to ask you to come into to the office as of this moment." But some are just keen to crack on and but still leave the option for the odd day here and there at home. It's yeah, it's really encouraging to hear that, especially from the city perspective, because hospitality has gone nuts since reopening.
Yeah,
As you know, it's still the place that people go to for their experiences, isn't it? You know that people have just been deprived of experiences, and you guys have got well, certainly what I think is a fabulous product.
thank you.
And as I said at the top of the show, two of my favorite things in the world, so you can't go wrong.
Same here.
Yeah, great. Well, let's go back to the beginning. How did you end up getting into hospitality in the first place?
I suppose when you're the youngest of four, you definitely look up to the other three, and two out of the three were in hospitality.
Okay,
One of them still is. He actually works at Goodman as well,
right.
and
God, it is a small world.
it really is. It really is. Me and him have. It's interesting because, as you'll find out in a minute, he was the first person to give me a shot in hospitality. We worked together, then we split up. We ran parallel, and then now, since the end of 2019, we've been back together, working
Right.
at the company. So it's a cool thing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were working in hospitality, which at the time was kind of in the middle of what was known as the Celtic Tiger, which was probably the biggest economic boom that Ireland has ever seen. And they were working in hospitality at that point, which I would safely say was peak, considering
Right.
that they were working in a small hotel, not a medium-sized hotel in a small town in County Roscommon in the west of Ireland, and the business that they were doing and the money they were making and all of that kind of stuff. And when you're a kid, you're like 9, 10, 11 years old, and you see that happening, and you see how much crack they're having, and you see them making money and doing something really. I don't know, there's something. Hospitality for me is a really wholesome thing, and there was such an wholesome element to it because it was very much like a family setup where they worked.
Yeah. But it's also you're giving, as discussed, you're actually giving people the opportunity to enjoy themselves, and that's a very honourable thing to do, I think.
Yeah, there's something about feeding someone and giving someone something to drink, like nourishment. There is something very symbolic about the whole thing, and a kind of the hospitality bug kind of bit me, and that kind of came from my parents in many ways because even though neither of them are the industry or never have been,
Mm.
our house was always was and still is a very social house. Always people swinging by, always people calling in. Like we had some days where there were people coming through that we never thought we'd see coming through the door. Like people that
Right.
were from a different time in mum and dad's life or my life or whoever, and just the level of hospitality that they were able to instantly give, and also anticipating their needs as well, and knowing what to offer, when to offer it, all of that kind of stuff. That really kind of hit home for me. And so then you combine that with what the lads were doing working in the hotel. So I started chipping away at them. And then when I was about just before I turned 14, I think, I started in my brother's hotel helping recycle glass bottles from the bars.
Okay.
So I remember doing my first shift there and I got 40 euros and I was as happy as a clam. And I was like, yeah, I dig this. But yeah, so that kind of carried on for a bit. And then my brother, Martin, who works for Goodman now, so this is kind of like the start of our journey. He went to a very big hotel opening in Claremorris in County Mayo in the west of Ireland, which was called McWilliam Park Hotel, and it was like I think it's one of the biggest hotel openings in Ireland in a very very long time, because there is no real hotel of that level and that standard in that area. There was a couple of 5-star hotels, but they were kind of more in remote areas and they're more destination places, as you know.
Yeah.
So once the time came, he asked me if because of the law and stuff, I was able to work some hours. So he said, "Why don't you come?" And I said, "Okay, cool." So I went. I picked up where I left off, recycling bottles, stocking bars, all of that sort of thing. I was a bit of a featherhead, so he had to give me a couple of very stern but fair telling offs.
Bit of a
Because
featherhead. I like that one.
I was, yeah. I don't know. I just kind of there's an element. I suppose it's like when you start any job where you kind of go into it and you go, "Actually, this will be handy," because you look at the people that are doing it already who work to get to the point that they're at, and then you say to
Mm.
yourself, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll be there in no time." But yeah, I wasn't. So he so I started working for him, and he trained me and kind of laid the foundations really. And that went from doing cellar work, and then I started working in their functions and conference. We instantly became a big venue for weddings, so we were knocking out 2, 3, 4 weddings every week.
Right.
Ultimately, found my way into the bar, which was something I really got into. The restaurant. So I touched all points of the business in terms of front of house, and I had 5 very very happy years there. I met some lovely people. So that was kind of the real start, and then I kind of came to the point where I was getting ready to go to college, and I ended up doing a hospitality degree.
Okay. So you kind of had built some experience, as you said, touched a few areas of the business, and that this was enough at this point to think, yeah, I'm onto something here.
Yeah, definitely. At this point, we're now looking at about 2010, 2011
Okay.
ish. So we're
Yeah.
looking at a point where the recession has really hit Ireland,
Right. Yeah.
and all of us are in a very, very difficult position. And just kind of had a long think about it. And then all of a sudden, one day, Fáilte Ireland, who are the hospitality board for the Republic of Ireland, announced that to get more people into hospitality, if you took any of this list of courses in any of this list of universities, your fees would be waived. So once that came up, I kind of went, that's a sign. That's something to tell me that I have
Yeah.
to go and, do this.
Free education. Thanks
Free
very much.
free education, save me and save my parents a substantial amount of money every single year. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So, but funny enough, I kind of around the end of my time in the hotel got bitten by the cooking bug,
Okay.
and I ended up actually initially training as a chef,
Right.
which was a lot of fun. Met some great people. I think I went to I think is the best hospitality school in Ireland, which is the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology in
Right. Yep.
Galway. And God Almighty, the level of people they had there educating was just really something else. So I did the cooking thing. I really enjoyed it. I pretty halfway through the year kind of realized it wasn't for me, and then
I think it's one thing, isn't it, to enjoy it, but that has to be an absolute labor of love.
Yeah, and then I got through kind of half the year, and at that point, then I started taking a pastry module, and I was lectured by a lady named Anne Flanagan Kelly, and she is an absolute force of nature. She was. I think she was head pastry chef at the Ritz in Paris.
Right.
So, and just really, really phenomenal. And then it was another point where I kind of said, oh, maybe pastry is the thing. But then I thought for my cholesterol and my mortality, it mightn't be the best move, whatever.
So you picked wine instead, which is so much better.
Well, this is
Yeah.
the thing. So I kind of got to the end of the year, and then I remember I was out for the day with my parents, and they looked at me and they said, "You've been thinking about something all day." And they said, "What is it?" And I said, "I'm thinking about making a switch, to be honest." And I said, "I've already talked to some people, and I'm already able to transfer into the bar and restaurant management course, which was a bar and restaurant manager's degree, so hospitality, but it's in a bachelor of business. So you're getting a business degree and you're getting a hospitality degree." So
Right.
I kind of thought that sounds cool. That opens a lot of doors. And I'm actually working at the minute, so my work will actually reflect what I'm doing when I go to school. And my
Yeah.
parents were like, "Do it, absolutely," because they said, it's better that it's much easier when you find out at the end of the first year that you don't want to do it, rather than 2, 3, 4, or even when you've completed it.
Yeah.
So,
God, doesn't that show you the importance of supportive parents?
oh God, yeah, they've just been so carte blanche. Like they're the most supportive, amazing people on the planet. And the main thing, the only things really that they really kind of instilled in me, which was reflective of my brothers, especially the one that trained me, is two things. One of them is treat people how you want to be treated, and that there is absolutely no substitute for hard work. None,
Here,
nothing.
here. Yeah. I
So,
think, do you know, you've absolutely nailed the secret of life right there. Those two things for me, I think, are just two fundamentals. If you get that into your psyche, then I don't think you can ever go too far wrong.
yeah, I don't think so, and it's still with me today. I'm in a job right now that I is a dream job, to say the least. But it's also been the most balanced job I've had, in terms of, I do my hours and I go home. I have a social life. I can do other things. But then every now and again, like a couple of weeks ago, I had two sommeliers on holiday, and one came down with COVID. So I usually had five, so I was down to three. I usually have six, including myself. I was down to three. So
Yeah.
I just knocked out like an 85 hour week. And I just felt that kind of adrenaline coming back from when I was younger, kind of going, yeah, yeah, this is the thing. But then I was like, no, I can't do this all the time.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is if you love what you do, then you don't. When something like that happens, you don't mind chipping in.
Yeah,
If you're having to do 85 hours every single week of your life, that's not sustainable.
yeah, yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. But
Yeah. Anyway, we jumped forward there, and that was my fault. I apologize.
no, it's fine. It's fine. It's all part of the journey. But so then I switched to the course, which was amazing, and then I ended up actually having a wine module, and I was kind of like, oh, this is cool. So I did it, and I think it was the lady delivering the course. Her name is Elizabeth Fox, and she's just my hero. Like, just everything about her resonated with me so much. Just the knowledge, the confidence, the kindness, the presentation, the hospitality, and I just kind of thought, yeah, that's what I want to be. That's who I want to be. Is that? Um,
Right. So that the moment
that was
then.
definitely a start of it, I think, and
Right.
then I did some work experience, and I had to write some stuff for, paperwork for my course and all that. I ended up doing a placement here, working for the Cavendish Hotel on Jermyn Street in Piccadilly,
Yep.
which was phenomenal, really phenomenal, and some work experience in Ireland. So that all was a thing, and then I kind of came to the end of it. I ended up finishing my degree and having the bit of paper in my back pocket. My wine module actually was my best subject, hilariously. I just found myself really, really getting into it week after week. And it's one of those things as well where you do other coursework And as soon as it's done, you fling it. You get rid of the books, you get rid of the whole lot. You don't want to look at it again. But the wine stuff, I just remember sitting on a couch and just reading it and just being
Right.
like, oh, okay. And then, just Googling some stuff and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But the real aha moment came where it's the same thing that happens to every single one of us as soon as we finish university is even though we've done this thing for an assorted period of time, we walk out the door and we say, what am I going to do for the next 60 years? And it's kind of one of those
Yeah.
things where
It's a sobering thought, isn't it?
it really is, yeah. You really have to have a think about it. And I was like, I don't want to manage bars. I kind of had a bit of when I was at the Cavendish, they were really cool at kind of putting me in the kind of supervisor slash manager's shoes and seeing what they do and all that kind of stuff. And same goes to the restaurant. And I was like, I don't know if I'm mad on either. So I had a good think about it anyway. Meanwhile, GMIT had a fantastic relationship with some hospitality outlets in the United States, and they would
Right.
trade staff and they would trade students for like work experience because obviously you can go on a J1 visa, which is much easier to get when you're a student, etc., etc. So I had gone
Yeah.
to them in my penultimate year, but I was late. I can't remember how or why, and then I got there, and then all the jobs were taken. It was so weird. It was so like
Right.
it was so like post depression war or something. I got there and they're like, "Oh, no more jobs, kid. Sorry, come back tomorrow." So I was like, "Okay,
God.
that's weird, but okay."
Yeah.
And then she said, "Come back next year when we do this, and we promise you we'll have a job." And I was like, "Sure, fine, whatever." And I left, and I didn't think about it, but I put a note on my calendar on my phone. And then when it came up again, I was like, "Sure, I'll go for the crack." And I went, and they were like, "Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Great." And they sorted everything, paperwork, visa, everything. All I had to do was book flights and go. So I was like,
Mm.
"Okay, cool. So I'm going to do this." So this was kind of a members only beach club out on Long Island, membership only, very exclusive, full of very, very lovely people. And that's where the wine thing kind of started because I had kind of, at this point, the wine thing was really starting to ramp up. And I was kind of talking about it a lot more very openly and all of that kind of stuff. And what led to that was everybody that I was working with there in the club knew that I was into wine and I actually knew how to like open a bottle of wine and stuff like that.
Mm.
And the members used to send their wines in advance of the season. Like I remember one guy sent like 12 times 12 bottles of Camus Select Reserve Cabernet 2014. And I don't even want to imagine how much money that was. And then some others were like sending bottles of Opus 1. Other ones were sending DRC. Other ones were sending Sina Quinon. Like some of the most expensive and most rare wines ever in the world.
Yeah.
And I ended up opening a good bit of them. And it was kind of when I was doing all of that, I kind of thought to myself, now there's something here. And it kept at me. And then I started buying books. I started reading. I started taking in knowledge. I found some stuff going on, like any tastings or any places that were selling good wine. I'd go there and I'd try and do all of that kind of stuff. So my J1 ended anyway, and I came home. I didn't plan on coming home. I didn't plan on getting on the plane. And then I got a phone call from the Secret Service 2 days before my flight that freaked me out. So I got
Right. Go on. There's
I
a story here.
it was so weird. It was like I felt like I was in one of the Jason Bourne films. It was like I was just sitting on my couch, and it was 2 days before the flight, and I hadn't checked in. Right, so I was already able to check in for a week, but I hadn't checked in yet.
Right.
And my visa was up the day I was flying, so I had to be gone. And then I was just sitting on the couch, and then all of a sudden I get a call from a blocked number, and I answered it, and it was like, "I'm such and such from United States Secret Service, particularly part of immigration, la la la." And he said, just to ensure that you've taken all the precautions to check in for your flight, and just be sure that you're on it. And I was like,
Yeah. Just to make sure that you are leaving in 2 days' time.
yeah. So I was like, I think I should go. Because I would like to come back someday. That'd be nice. So I came home and it was just still in my head, still in my head, still in my head. And I came back and I went to see Liz Fox at the university because I thought I'll get her take on it.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you think? I said, this sommelier thing, I've never heard of it, but I might give it a crack. And she said, you're about as capable of as anyone I've ever taught to do it. So she said, To be
Brilliant.
honest, she said it's a no-brainer. So that's still one of the nicest and most confidence lifting things anyone's probably said to
Just
me.
gives you a lift at exactly the right time, right? I mean,
Yeah,
imagine if she'd have turned around and said, "Shane, you're nuts. There's no way in the world
yeah,
that that's going to
exactly,
work for you."
exactly.
That's a pivotal moment right there in your life.
Really is,
It
really is.
it also shows you the again the importance of having positive people around you who who believe in you, who see something in you to help you get to that next level, and also your own kind of awareness of, right, who do I know who might help me get on this journey? And of course, you go back to Elizabeth because she's the the lady who first inspired you to it, and I love little things like that because it sounds like such a simple thing, but so many people don't ask for guidance and help. They think they've just got it nailed.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose as well, obviously I'm doing this, and I've done a couple of other interviews recently because someone out there randomly decided I was interesting. So
Yeah,
in that time, including yourself, thank you.
yeah. Well, that remains to be seen, but no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I get past the half-hour mark, I'll be doing all right.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. You
and
get a call from a Secret Service agent saying, "Right, time's up on the podcast now."
yeah, go to work.
Yeah,
It, but like it's because of that, it's been probably the first time I've ever sat down and pieced it all together.
yeah,
Because hospitality, as much as life, is just this collection of absolutely fleeting moments. But when like I've had to really sit down and really think about it and really think, where I am. And obviously, lockdown last year, everybody having the time to actually sit down and think and reflect and, think about
yeah,
where they want to take their lives from here. Because I suppose in essence, it's quite morbid, but we've all kind of had 18 months taken away from us.
yeah.
Um,
No, no,
so,
I completely agree.
so I suppose in essence, we've all decided in our minds how we're going to make sure that, you know, I believe that we've lost the 18 months, but I also believe we can make them back. So
Yeah,
by
yeah,
being better to ourselves and each other, I think we can definitely expand our lifespans and then be able to live out what we wanted to live out in that time that's been lost.
here, here. Yeah, no, never a truer word said. That's maybe one of the most philosophical things that's been said on this show.
I know, and I'm not a very philosophical guy, so what should I put in this coffee? Anyway,
Yeah,
but so that was an amazing confidence booster. And then I
yeah,
came to
yeah.
London and absolutely blagged my way into a job working for Viniteca, which was so much fun. The managers there, a Swedish lady named Ida and a Canadian lady named Maya, really took me under their wings for this short time I was there. I learned a lot and I just had a great time. And I suppose it was also a cool way of kind of putting out the feelers to see, because wasn't quite sommelier, so it was a nice step
Right.
into it as well. So I suppose it was a nice thing to go, you know, is this the right path?
But do you know? You said you blagged your way in, but I'm betting that half the battle here is the fact that you arrive to the interview or whatever, however you got the job,
Yeah,
like a guy who is hungry for knowledge, and clearly that would have come across in the way that you would have presented yourself and the way that you would have spoken about what was to be your craft for the next few years.
yeah,
And I think that's, for me, that's half the battle a lot of the time, is just seeing the enthusiasm and energy for the subject matter that the person's here for the role for.
100%, 100%. It's the first thing I'm looking for today when I'm interviewing people.
Because you can fill in the blanks, right? I mean, if the passion's not there from the outset, it's very difficult to fill in passion.
Oh, without question, because especially working for our restaurant group, especially when looking at Goodman, there's two things that you have to have. One is knowledge, one is personality, and there's one of them I can't teach.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that knowledge.
yeah, yeah.
I think you probably could teach personality. I think there you go. There's a future business idea for you. But
Oh
anyway,
Jesus, I don't know about that now. Yeah, so I was there for a short time, and then I got contacted by a lady named Laura Patry, who is the group wine buyer for the social company. And it was just such a cool, fun interview and idea. It just kind of made me go, yeah, I'll definitely do it. I met up with her. I was I was keeled over with nerves
Right.
because she's one of the best sommeliers in London and has been for a long, long time. And
Mm.
I met her, and she was like, "Hey, I seen your CV. Let's have a chat. Tell me about some wines." I BS some wines to her. Then she said, I've got this concept. I'm opening kind of it's a restaurant that does small plates, so tapas style, but there's gonna be a heavy emphasis on wine, and I'm literally writing a bit of a dream wine list, and it's gonna be a shop. So, and she said, there's gonna be a chance to learn. There's gonna be da 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 da, and I was like, I'm in, definitely,
Mm.
100%. So,
All in.
yeah, so that was my first restaurant opening, which was pretty. Yeah, that was pretty intense. Wasn't the most
And what was
intense.
your job title at this point?
So I started as a commis sommelier,
Right.
and she just said there was an opportunity to work my way up, which I did. And for the time that I was there, yeah, I did. I ended up becoming junior sommelier. I obviously had planned on going further, but ultimately there wasn't much movement in the company in regards positions for wine, so I kind of had to look elsewhere, unfortunately, which is a
Right.
shame because I really enjoyed working there. But the
Yeah.
time that I did work there, because I spent nigh on a year and a half working with them and doing the opening and being there for that first 18 months was, amazing. I opened so much great wine. I learned so much, especially from her, especially about service, especially about. I think the main thing I learned from her is definitely about relationships, but not just with the people you're serving it to, but with the people that make what you're serving.
Oh
Um,
God, I could only imagine that would be, well, nothing but a positive thing in terms of the experience that you can then deliver
yeah,
to the guest.
100%, because there's producers, because obviously with our restaurant group we're very heavy on California wines, as am I, and I'm actually in a position now where when winemakers produce their new wines, they come over to the UK and they want me to be one of the first people to see them,
Oh,
which is a mind bending, honor and privilege and stuff like that. So, but then to be able to
absolutely.
go to the table and be able to tell them, yes, this vintage or this vintage, well, I know both. I've tried both. They've told me about both. I know all the crack. And I think that was the main thing for her when it came to recommending wines and stuff like that, because she knows everyone.
Yeah.
She's just able to have that little bit more of a connection. I suppose as well, it just shows, because in wine there's this massive side in regards mass production, one size fits all, do it, done, bottle it, send it. Whereas there's some on
Mm.
the other side where every single year it's a new child being born, and every one of them is completely different.
Yeah. Well, there's so many factors, isn't there, that affect how a vintage turns out. But I can only speak as a consumer and an avid consumer at that of wine. But I love it when I'm in a restaurant and somebody comes over and they can give a little bit of history as to who the winemaker is, why they went into it. All of the kind of just the heritage of the wine that you're drinking. I think that adds a wonderful element to the guest experience.
Yeah, yeah, it's nice to be able to tell people what's actually gone into the whole thing.
Yeah.
um and I think also as well for me is to let that person know how much they appreciate that you're drinking their wine, from the perspective of that harvest that they do every September, October, or March, April, May, if you're upside down, is their salary.
Yeah.
That's what they have to live off for the next 365 days.
Yeah.
So it's so important to let the guests know how chuffed the winemakers are that you're drinking their wines, which I think is one of the best things about social media. Because that's the other side to wine as well, is in terms of the quote unquote business side, is where, an importer or wholesaler is speaking directly to a producer. And it's just, it's just good news, Alan. And he's saying, oh, yeah, people are buying it. It's fantastic. Yeah, flying off the shelves. Ha ha ha. But that's it. And the winemaker won't know any more information. Whereas I can do what I did when I woke up this morning. I picked up my phone. I Instagrammed some bottles that I served last night at our Mayfair restaurant. So the people of, I've got it here beside me, the people of Sine Qua Non, Familia Schroeder, Oak Farm, Domaine de Montcalm, and Antinori all know that a bottle of their wine was opened last night in a great restaurant and someone loved it.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
definitely one
that's
of the most
awesome.
positive things, especially when it comes to social media, is just to make us all feel connected because it's just one big membrane going from the start to the finish, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And that clear, deep respect that you then have for each other as well. You know, clearly that's reciprocated because you're then invited to go and do the first tasting of the year.
Yeah.
And if you ever need a plus one, you know where I am. I'm
Oh,
sure I'm sure the list is long for that plus one.
oh no, I've got your number. There's plenty going on, Phil. Don't worry.
Very good, very good. There we are. It's worth starting the podcast just for that. Um, no, anyway, yes. Sorry, I literally could talk about this subject for days on end, but we have once again jumped
Yeah.
forward. You were at the social company at Social Tapas, and then you wanted to kind of right. There was no further movement for you there, so you had to look beyond. Where did you end up next?
I ended up going to Gordon Ramsay Group, which was one of my boxes to tick. It was one of my ambitions. So
Yeah,
I went and worked at the Savoy Grill initially, and then I afterwards became this almost kind of traveling gypsy sommelier of going between, not quite gypsy because it was the Savoy Grill, Petrus, which was their one Michelin star, and Restaurant Gordon Ramsay, which is their three Michelin star.
yeah,
And
yeah. I wouldn't mind being a gypsy between those three for
yeah,
sure.
that was definitely a fun part of life. I think in terms of the Ramsey Group, certain people in there really brought my hospitality to the next level. I think I met a gent there who was one of the managers, and I yeah, I love him and I miss him. I hope you're well if you're listening to this, George. His name is George Camaras. He was a Greek gent. And sometimes, you can be taught food knowledge, you can be taught wine knowledge, but he was one of the first people to really pull me aside and just teach me a couple of things. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
Because he
right.
could, because
Yeah,
he could see that, I'm keen, and he can see that there's more to me than just wine. But to go from a casual tapas outlet serving great wine to go into fine dining where you know a service doesn't pass and there's someone of note sitting at a table eating and
yeah.
drinking, he was one of the first people to really pull me aside and just give me some really amazing advice. And just even during service, he'd pull on my waistcoat and say, "Loved what you did there." He said, "Keep doing that." Or next time he'll go, "Do it that way," and see what the guest reacts like. And he was so good at that. Like he really, really was.
Right.
And Antonio
That's
Rivera,
that's cool. That I like that
yeah, it's so cool. It's really, really so
subtle
cool.
management.
Yeah, big time, big time.
Yeah,
And in terms of, because he ended up doing some shifts when I went to Petrus that time. He came doing some shifts as well, and I don't know what it was. After a while, you're in sync with somebody, and just we were like clockwork, me and him.
yeah,
I enjoyed working with him so much, and just be able to work in that dining room, to work for Antonio Rivera, who's my head sommelier. He was one of the first guys that showed me how to be a good buyer, how to be a smart buyer in terms of the stuff that he bought for the restaurants, because he never bought a single bottle of wine that just sat there. Never did.
right,
Always had a list that
right.
was always moving, which was such a cool thing.
No bin ins on that list.
Oh no, definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah, not been in prices anyway. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, and just in terms of kind of a life experience, being able to serve the type of people I served, who gets to say that on the same table every Saturday night you were serving Tom Jones, you know,
yeah,
Sir Tom Jones,
yeah.
sorry,
Oh,
and
I was going to crack a joke then, but I held it in. I held it in. Something about being not unusual, but anyway.
and just all of that kind of stuff is just is such a cool thing, and I have so many great memories of just serving people there. Standout one, there was one with Tom Jones. There was another one with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Came in for a really late dinner one night, and I was just one of those moods where I was just in the mood for just having a bit of crack with everyone. So
Right.
he ordered a really nice glass of Californian wine we had on the caravan. And obviously he went for that because he was the governor of California at the time. And I went up to the table
Yep.
with the wine list and I said, "Are you sure you want that? You don't want to be drinking that crap." I said, "Drink something for an Oregon or something like that." And he gave me his full Arnie get to the chopper voice. And he was like, "I can't believe I'm the governor of California. He's recommending Oregon wine." And his person that was with him, whether it was security or whatnot, was also Irish. And he just looked at me and went, he's Irish. He's having you on." And he burst out laughing. And we just had such a great laugh over it. And I was just thinking,
Oh,
what a random thing.
sweaty moment there.
Oh,
Sweaty moment.
I know. Yeah, I know. I had no fear that day. I don't know why. But so that whole experience as well was a massive confidence booster as well, because I was working at Savoy, I was working at Petrus, and then I got to work a couple of shifts at Royal Hospital Road, working with James Lloyd, he's not human. He's like the ultimate sommelier. Like he's I don't know. He's just really, really unbelievably phenomenal and still very much underrated in London in my books. It was
Yeah.
a massive boost to be able to work in 3 different restaurants, have 3 different wine lists and 3 food menus in my head at the same time, and at the drop of a hat, dress appropriately, walk in and do service.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a real sign of growth
No doubt.
for
One
me.
that you take that on with gusto rather than fear, because these are all aspirational restaurants that that are known the world over, especially Royal Hospital Road, of course, because it still maintains its three
Yeah,
stars. But yeah, I have an experience of Royal Hospital Road from the wine perspective. It was the first place that I wanted to save up money to and go to with my she was my fiance at the time, not my she's now my wife,
yeah,
to do a little bit of impressing. But we had the money for the food. We didn't have a lot of money for the wine. But even then, when I made that kind of clear in the early stages of the conversation, the wine experience that they still gave us for back, and this is going back like 15 years ago, was for about 40 quid for a bottle of wine, as
yeah,
opposed to hundreds of pounds that we could have spent, was no less brilliant. And equally critically for me, because I had experiences in fine dining restaurants whereby you say these things and then you're put way down the pecking order for the rest of the service. We still were made to feel like VIPs. We were still made to feel very special, and that to me was why that still remains for me one of the most amazing experiences, because everything was amazing from start to finish,
mm,
but also the realization that if you want value for money on wine, it's out there. But go to somebody who knows what they're talking about. Don't just go to your local supermarket and pick out a $3.99 bottle of something. That's
yeah,
definitely not value for money.
yeah, definitely. And those, I'll call them out now. Those that don't do that, those that don't make you feel like a VIP regardless of how much you spent, those are the people that make my job 10 times harder,
Yeah,
because I feel really humbled and privileged anytime a guest gets so comfortable with me they just ask me anything. And one of the things I get asked a lot is, you know, the whole wine thing in a restaurant can be quite daunting. What is the what's the best thing to do? What should we do? And I said it's 2021. I said any rules about wine that ever existed, throw them out the window, because everything about wine today is all about serving wine to people how they want it to be served and for them to be happy with it. If
yeah,
if every table, like it was last night, happens, I'm happy. I left work last night and I was as happy as a clam, because I knew everybody was happy. Everybody drank great wine. Everybody had great food and had a brilliant time. And that's what it's all
yeah,
about ultimately. So all that I say to all of them and people that are listening to this right now, when you sit down in a restaurant, be 100% honest. Tell them what you want. Tell them how much you want to spend. I don't get this whole preconception about, oh, I can't tell them how much I want to spend, la la la. And it's this weird poker game where this sommelier guy is looking at you and seeing what kind of watch and what kind of shoes you're wearing and trying to calculate your annual income and what color your Amex is and all of this kind of stuff.
yeah,
Just talk to people, connect, communicate. And if you do that, and then you, as a hospitalitarian, regardless of your title, give them the experience as if they've just bought the most expensive bottle on the list, then you're doing your job.
Yeah.
Then you're doing your job. But
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ultimately, there are so many different types of people that walk through the doors of a restaurant. This was kind of uh, customer experience 101 when I was at university, talking about the fact that it doesn't matter whether it's the Queen. I mean, it probably does matter if it's the Queen. There's probably a few extra things that you need to do, mainly
sure.
around security, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But or someone like me, you just treat everybody as if they are a VIP.
100%. Yeah. All day.
Yeah.
All day.
Anyway, surprise, surprise, taking you off point again.
I'm just as bad now, so I have to throw my hands up. I'm just as bad.
But so we're with Gordon Ramsay Group at this point, and you've got your head in three spaces.
Yeah, was looking to go to the next level. Again, not much movement, which is I don't know. People kind of say, "Oh, you're dotting here and dotting there." Like when I was a bit younger, I'm still young technically. I was quite aggressive in terms of my movements and stuff like that because I'm motivated and I know what I want. So
Yeah.
and I kind of said I wanted to kind of try as many facets of wine as possible. So Vinoteca was a very cool mix of stuff. Social Wine and Tapas was brilliant in terms of iconic labels, like kind of labels for people that are really into their wine, not just the obvious ones, and some up and coming producers. The Ramsay Group was all about classic wines, and that was such an unbelievable education. And then I just kind of thought, where do I go next? And then I was flicking through LinkedIn one day and I came across a guy named Sean Hamilton. And we somehow managed to get in touch. And he said, I just joined Adam Handlin. He is a chef that competed on MasterChef a few years ago. He currently has a pop up in Spitalfields and is getting ready to open his own restaurant. And we're looking for wine people. And I was like, okay, cool. He said, yeah. So he said, the wine director is Kelvin McCabe and you can come and meet the two of us. And I was like, brilliant. And as soon as I heard Kelvin's name, I was like, okay, so this is interesting because Kelvin is one of the best buyers, sommeliers, all of the above in London. And I'd heard so much about this guy, and I'd read a lot of his wine lists, and I absolutely loved the combination of smart buying and just really great imagination and really great thoughts in terms of food and wine pairing, as that was something I was really kind of divulging in at the time. And then yeah, we had a very brief conversation and I got invited to go work for them and open this restaurant in Covent Garden, and I was just like, yeah, I was, gung-ho, let's do it. And I ended up joining them and we opened Frog. By God, I would say it's about a week from today, 4 years ago, give or take.
Right.
Give or take.
Yeah.
Just came into my head now, Phil. But
Right.
yeah, so got in there. The restaurant opening was probably the craziest, most overwhelming, most intense thing I've ever done in my entire life. We started the day we opened. We started work at 6 a.m. and the restaurant wasn't finished being built yet. And then
Right.
the first customers walked through the door at 5:30. We knocked out 47 covers, give or take. And I went home at 4 a.m., I think.
Crikey.
I would probably do it again tomorrow if someone asked me to. But at the same time, maybe with a health warning.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable, but it was worth all of it because what came from there then was working with Kelvin, and I don't think if I hadn't worked for Kelvin and I hadn't learned everything that I learned off him and what he taught me, I definitely wouldn't be where I am right now or even close to it
Right.
because he instilled the belief in me that it could happen, which is therefore why he was very generous with his knowledge and with his time. Anytime I asked him a question, he'd give me an answer to 10. And it was always this fantastic conversation that led from things to like treating guests, to buying wines, to writing a list, to designing a list, to relationships with suppliers, dealing with stock, hitting your targets, all of this kind of stuff. And in between, there'd be loads of conversations about food and music and Arsenal and stuff like that.
We definitely don't want to be talking about Arsenal at the moment. But anyway.
No. That's definitely something that's off the menu
Yeah.
for our conversations, I'd say. But Yeah, and because a lot of what I'd done initially was quite classic with a bit of kind of up and coming stuff there. This experience working for Kelvin really blew the doors off for me. I think it was there where I really just kind of unshackled myself from all of this kind of classical reproach about wine, and just and from there I just kind of said, I don't really care where it's from or how it's made or who makes it, just as long as it's great,
Right.
and as long as
Yeah.
it's something that my guests will enjoy. So
Yeah.
it's
Do you think that comes from you? You've kind of devoted the part of your career to this point to kind of fast track learning, really, in different environments. But then you get to a certain point whereby you've you've got knowledge now, so that allows you more to your own personality to come out with it as to what's going to work for you and what type of business is going to work for me going forward.
yeah, I really blossomed, and I really started to understand what I was all about, and kind of deciding as well ultimately where I wanted to take myself. Because once I got to the end of my time at Adam Handlin, to be honest, I at that point I left because I was burned out and I needed to take
Yeah.
some time off. So I took some. I call that was in 2018, and I called 2018 my gap year because
Right.
I took some time off because I had been working from Adam Handlin, and I was getting ready to do my advanced sommelier diploma, which I passed theory and service, but I failed tasting by a single wine.
Right.
And I didn't take that well. I thought I did, but I didn't. And it really hammered my confidence to the point where I was it almost kind of set me back a bit.
Right.
So I kind of almost had to take the rest of 2018 to kind of look after myself a bit professionally, and then just kind of redevelop and learn and just decide where I wanted to go from there. So I ended up crossing paths with Guillaume and Chris from Antidote Wine Bar in Soho, which is kind of like the original mecca of natural wine in London. And once again,
Mm.
it's another facet of wine that I wanted to get into. And I had a really fun experience. And they were great guys, and they were lovely to work for. Again, they showed me the importance of having relationships with producers, because we had producers coming in all the time.
Yeah.
And that was also a really nice thing. And then, yeah, so I got to the end of 2018. I was like, okay, cool, I'm done with this. What's 2019 got for me? And it was so funny because as soon as I left, literally, literally, less than an hour later, I got a text from Kelvin saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, this is so weird." And not what are you doing as in, friendly as in what are you doing. He was like, "What are you doing for work?" And I was like, this is so weird. So he said, listen, loads of stuff going on here. We're redeveloping Covent Garden. At this point, we had relocated to a new site in Hoxton Square, and they were just getting ready to
Yeah.
open the Cadogan Hotel in Chelsea with the Belmont Group. And
Yeah.
he was like, listen, if you just want to come and work for a couple of months and work with me again for a while, he said, I need you. He said, even just for this, he said, you can use this to have some money coming in while you look for what you want to do ultimately. So
That's not a bad offer.
it's definitely not. So I went back, and yeah, I went back and I worked there, and I'm so glad I did, because I think I realized going back there to work that it was then when I kind of realized how much failing that exam really knocked me, because
Mm.
I remember being on the floor there and thinking, I'm not the way I used to be, I'm different. But that's not a bad thing. I think I definitely redeveloped and regenerated and was looking at things in a different way.
Yeah.
And I suppose as well, I kind of had lost the mojo a small bit, but then going back there to work and going back to work for Kelvin and for Adam again, and with Sean, the group GM, he's a phenomenon. Really, just kind of got me going again, and and it was just nice as well to have that bit of security that they were so nice to still upon me, in terms of they knew I wasn't going to do this permanently, so it was my chance to really pick what I wanted to do next.
Yeah.
And again, all happens through casual conversations. My operations manager, Gordon Ramsay, who was actually the guy that got me into going into the other restaurants to kind of help out and such and such. Alex is obviously my brother was also working at Gordon Ramsay at the time. So that's where
Yeah.
we crossed paths again, and then we're all friends. And they were out one night socially, and he said, "What's Shane doing?" And Martin said, "Oh, he's back working for Adam Handlin, but he's doing it kind of casually, giving them a hand and stuff like that. But he's just looking for what he wants to do proper." He said, "I think he wants to take a proper step up. I think he's ready for it." And Alex went, "Yeah." He said, "I just joined this company and my buyer is leaving. So do you think you might be interested?" Martin said, "Yeah." He said, "Give him a shout." So, and it was the timing was impeccable, because I think at that point the restaurant in Chelsea was open, Covent Garden was cool, Hoxton was cool, and Kelvin was cool. Most importantly, so
Yeah.
once I realized he was fine, I was like, okay, great, this is the perfect time for me to go, because I could have gone earlier, but I didn't, because I knew that I still had work to do, and there was ways I could help, and also there was just other things that just wasn't really popping out to me offer wise.
Mm.
And then Alex said, "Listen, I just need some help. If you can come and help," he said, "I don't know if we're going to refill the buyer role. We're going to see how things go." So I said, "Fine, so let's do it." So I joined Goodman July of 2019, and I started out originally at their Canary Wharf restaurant, and then it was just pure growth from there. I went from being a sommelier at Canary Wharf. I was made wine buyer and group head som for Goodman in February of 2020. And then of May this year, I was made group wine buyer for all of GRH, which is the entire restaurant group of Goodman, Beast, and Zellman, 5 sites. So
Yeah.
in terms of picking your move, I think I I picked it pretty well. But also, just to be in a place like this, to be looked after in the way that I am, and to have people that believe in me, that'll put their neck out for me. Helen Butland, who's our operations director, if it wasn't for her belief, I definitely wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing. I just thought she was amazing from the moment I met her,
Right.
because I got there was a bit of movement going on. There was people coming, there was people going, and I kind of thought, oh God, what's going on here now? And then she was on maternity, and then she returned, and 10 minutes into our conversation, I was like, yeah, I made the right move. I should be here.
Right.
And since
Brilliant.
then, she's just kind of taken me on her wing, and we've just kind of gone for it, really. But I kind of jumped from one position to another there. But I suppose it's just to show the progression, the continuation, and just trying to remind myself I made a good decision.
Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And of course, all of that was taking place to a backdrop of this little cold thing that's been doing the rounds for the last 18 months.
Yeah, that's been interesting. Last year not being able to buy anything, and then this year I don't have much to buy, so that's a weird thing. But like,
Mm.
on the other hand, it's kind of helped in terms of learning the facets of the job and adapting, because obviously, I get this job as the head of wine for Goodman. I was like, great, this is gonna be gangbusters. I have loads of ideas. And then exactly 49 days later, I was told to go home. And that was a weird thing. And then when we came back, the landscape had completely changed. Everything was different, and we had to look at things in a totally different manner. And I had to come up with some ways to try and help the company through this. So I was like,
Mm.
I didn't place an order for beverage for the first 9 weeks we were open. 9 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that.
Right.
Every every Thursday, I rented an Addison Lee van, and I filled it up with stock from one of the restaurants that was closed, and I transferred it to the one that was open. So
Right.
that I was literally doing my own orders. So I was picking it up, I was bringing it there, I was putting it in, I was doing the transfers, and yeah, that's the way it was, man. And it was also a thing of, so we reopened Goodman Mayfair, which I had to base myself at, and I was there and I was selling all this stock that I had from other restaurants. I wasn't listing any new wines because I couldn't, because I could have, but I just kind of thought, if there's ways we can save money, we'll save money. And the
Yeah.
list was reduced. There was wines coming, there was wines going.
But it's not like the wines that you would have been left with would have been substandard. This is still wines that you would have just had in stock from pre-pandemic.
Oh, listen, yeah, it was like all the restaurants were still full of wine when we closed, because who would have
Yeah.
thought, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was taking fine wine from the other restaurants left, right, and center, and kind of filling up myself, because people were coming and people were drinking it, because this is what they've wanted to do for 6 months. So
Yeah.
so yeah, so just in terms of that, as well. And it was a great education because ultimately, as well, I started at Canary Wharf and then was doing the odd shift at City in Mayfair. So I didn't, from a buyer's perspective, have the best outlook and understanding of what people were drinking there. So the fact that I was able to base myself at Mayfair and then do some more shifts in City just gave me a lot more confidence and definitely a lot more of an understanding. And I suppose when you're putting in that kind of graft, literally becoming your own supplier in many ways. I love telling tables that the wine was an issue with the supplier because the supplier was me. I found that really funny. And they did too, and they appreciated it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was it's been a fascinating time. Like it's been horrendous. Yeah, it's been absolutely horrendous for everybody. But from me on a professional front, I've learned so much. I really have learned so
Yeah.
much.
But this is one of the positives. If you want to search for positives in a pretty crap time, is that so many people have had to learn so many new things that it's not. Generally, you learn a lot more about yourself through the times of adversity than you do when things are easy. So if you're still here and you're still fighting, and your brain is awash with new ideas, then you're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose that's all kind of set me up for this time now of getting the rest of the year of under our belts and having a fresh year to start with from January next year,
Yeah,
which is brilliant because myself and Helen and everybody else in the kind of operations crew for the company, we've got loads of plans and loads of stuff that we want to do. So that's going to be the next
fantastic.
step of it all, which is going to be very, very cool.
Yeah, and I suppose that's been underpinned by returning business as well. So it gives you the financial foundation again to push forward.
Yeah, yeah, it's that bit of security. It's that bit of security because all everything that we did between lockdowns and stuff was just to make sure that most importantly we can pay our staff and pay our bills, and that's it really.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Fantastic. I'd noticed that you recently wrote an article for California Wines. Obviously, having your head in that space, it's something that you clearly care deeply about. Did the love of California wine come about, but kind of by accident, or was it something you were drawn to, or how did that happen?
Uh, very much a moth to a flame.
Right.
Obviously, massive exposure to it in the States, but obviously I knew nothing back then.
Yeah.
But then there was continuation from each restaurant that I worked in. But particularly when I went to the Savoy, was obviously because there was a lot of American clientele in the Savoy Hotel, obviously.
Yeah.
I opened a lot of American wine and a lot of great American wine. And it was a bottle of 2010 Lillian Syrah from California. So Lillian is a wine made by a lady named Maggie Harrison, who was the first ever employee and assistant winemaker for Sina Quinan. So she was making some of the most unbelievable and expensive wines in the world. She's now living in Oregon making her own label, and this Syrah is from of Sina Quinan's vineyards and some of her own. But I remember opening that bottle of 2010 and just going, yeah, this is it. This is it. This is the one. So, and from there, there's something that draws it to me. I suppose as well, growing up, I was very fascinated and I'm still fascinated by American culture. Everything from sports to music to booze to people to politics. Like when I was in history was one of my best subjects in school, and I was particularly interested in American politics. So yeah, and there's some American relatives slash blood in my family, having lived there, and yeah, I suppose all of that kind of weighs
Just
itself
came
up.
together.
Yeah, and the Irish American thing, there's always been an amazing connection and relationship there. So yeah, I suppose if you bag all that up, there's an amazing connection between me and the wines. And like it's like California is it's a fascinating wine region because obviously the bulk of the vineyards being planted, the money for that came from Gold Rush, which is why
Right.
Napa and Sonoma all falls down through the fall to the Silverado Trail. And
I did not know that.
yeah, and that happens. Winemaking from the mid to late 1800s absolutely booms, And then the worst possible thing that could happen to California wine, they actually do to themselves. They do prohibition for
Right.
12 years.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
that happens. And then all of a sudden, the wineries are still operating, making wink, wink, quote unquote, church wine. Then
Right.
World War II, then there's the Depression. Then World War II comes along. And then post World War II, for the next 20 years or so, some producers start to come back. Some very influential people kind of start to show up, like Chelachev and stuff like that. And then kind of the mid 60s is when the kind of late 50s, early 60s is when that kind of, boom happens. Robert Mondavi opens the first brand new winery in California when he launched his first vintage in 1966. And then you have the early 70s. Duckhorn produced their first vintage in the early 70s. Cakebread made their first vintage in 74. And since then, it's just been absolutely rolling. And it's gone from what was back then up until kind of the late 80s, early 90s, like, low alcohol, prized on acidity, really lovely wines, very different to their Bordeaux and Burgundy counterparts, made from those varietals. And then obviously the
Mm.
90s come, and that's very driven by critics. It's very driven by points, and people's tastes start to change. So you're starting to see a lot more extraction, a lot more oak. So people competing to have those medals put on their bottles and stuff like that. And and then you get into the 2000s, and you're starting to see a surge in just something different, really.
Yeah.
There's now more grape varietals grown in California than there's ever been. There's over 350 different varietals, grown there now. And it's it's interesting because it's still such a young wine region, and it's also still a wine region where, thankfully, I think 85 to 90% of everything is family owned. But on the other hand, everything is, in terms of ownership and producers, a lot of it is still first generation. So that's the
Right.
interesting
Right.
thing, because that's what kind of was the zenith of change in Burgundy in terms of the winemaking styles and the plethora of wines that are available. So that's going to be interesting when the kind of second generation kicked in
Mm.
California. And there's a lot of new producers coming in that are just producing what they want, where they want, and making great stuff. And I suppose that's
Yeah.
to tie all this up. That's the one thing I love about California is freedom, is that whole American gusto of, well, we've got some land here, can we plant some vines and make some wine? Sure, we'll give it a crack. We'll see how we get on. And they just do it. So I suppose when you tie it all together, that's kind of where my love affair for it comes from.
Yeah. You don't really know much about it, do you? The that, I felt like that was a test then, and you definitely passed because you know a lot more than I do. That's for sure. But no, I mean, I think there's. I think the thing about Californian wine for me is that it feels to me like it's a very recent boom in knowledge terms, in terms of the world are jumping on board now, but for a long time it wasn't there, and that was probably driven by the fact that the Californian wine that you could get in the supermarkets in this country was, like most of the wines from around the world, is not in the upper echelons of what you can achieve if you really know where to go and what you're looking for.
Yeah,
But yeah, in the last, I see a lot more American wine and Californian wine specifically on wine lists all over the place now, and quite right so, because I think you also can get incredible value in that place
oh
because
yeah,
it's still perceived to be, I suppose, an up and coming region as opposed to a Bordeaux or a Burgundy,
sure.
or somewhere like that. But no, it's a fascinating subject. Well, it's certainly fascinating to me. I hope it's fascinating to people who are listening as well.
I hope so.
Which is probably a little bit more important, actually. But there we are. But no, I'm eminently conscious of time, and I think you've been very generous with your time with us today. Final question before I let you get on your merry way: what would you say to somebody who was considering a career in hospitality, and specifically, perhaps within the world of wine?
Regardless of creed, consequence, race, sexual orientation, what sports team you support, what side of the street you walk on, anybody can do it. As long as you wake up every morning and tie your shoes with that will to win and that desire, you can achieve absolutely anything. I am from a very small place in the west of Ireland, and I've worked my way into this position now. Wine is a much more accessible thing than it was, shall we say, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It, along with hospitality, is going through a bit of a difficult time at the minute, not because of staffing, but because of the media, because of things that are coming out of the woodwork about certain producers, about certain people, about all of that kind of stuff. But if you're true to people and you're true to yourself, you'll get where you want to be.
Here, here. And for somebody who claims to not be particularly philosophical, that's the second piece of philosophy you've dished up today.
Oh man.
Yeah, it must be the coffee, as you said.
It's good.
But
It's good.
I completely agree with you, and that point actually on the media, and I'm also conscious of the fact that I'm quick to lambast it. Like in any facet of anything, there are people who do things well, and there are people who do not. And that's the same in the media, and it's the same in hospitality. But it just seems like it's the ones who do things badly that always gets the press.
Yes.
And that was kind of why I wanted to start this podcast, really, because that's not my experience. Is that probably accounts for 1% of the industry. The other 99% of the industry are people who genuinely love what they do and are in the right place and are trying to do something positive. But these are not the stories that get out. And I think your story is one of incredible positivity. And I love the kind of the reflection on your wobble, if you like, on the back of your exam result, because it's a massive part of your journey as well. And it's also that it kind of demonstrates that people's journeys are not straightforward. And there's always going to be little bumps in the road and all of those sorts of things. But if you've got a clear vision about something that you're passionate about, and that sits within any realm within hospitality, then come on in. We are ready for you.
100%, yeah, definitely.
Wonderful. Well, on that frightfully positive note, I'm gonna end it there. If people want to get a hold of you to chew the fat or learn about you and or talk about wine, what's the best method for them to do that?
I am on Twitter at smchugh38. I am on Instagram at craic. There's a funny story behind that.
Well, you probably have to tell us that then before you go.
I don't think I should.
Okay, fair enough.
It's a bit. I'll tell you over a pint someday. But maybe
very good. That's another one I've got to. All the best stories are going to be over a pint or a glass of wine. It probably should be a glass of wine.
Should be a glass of wine, yeah. So those, and I'm very open. If there's any young people or people starting out in this industry that want help, that want advice, want anything, my email is shane.mchugh@goodmanrestaurants.com. If anybody ever needs anything, just holler and I'll help.
Wonderful. That's great. Thanks very much, Shane. I've really enjoyed listening to your story, and look forward to catching up with you in face-to-face at some point in the not-too-distant future.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. And thanks a million for having me, Phil. I've really enjoyed it.
Pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers. Bye-bye. And there we have it. A huge thank you to Shane for sharing his story with such openness and humour. What a natural storyteller he is. He demonstrates yet another wonderful area you can come into within hospitality: wine. We wish he and Goodman continued success. We'll be back at 8 p.m. next Wednesday, but until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.